Hello everyone! It's been a year since I have been in Shanghai at my new international school for high school, and I want to share a bit of my experiences on how I got through the year with regards to the great number of tests, the end terms, midterms, and everything that I've had to do throughout the year to achieve the final score. A disclaimer before we start is that I think my video will be really helpful for anyone who is studying in the IB curriculum because the level that I was working at, it was sort of like a pre-IB, so it was really similar to what you would be seeing in an IB level, but it was a little bit obviously not as intense. So I think if you're taking the A-levels or the AP, just take this with a grain of salt, but I think this will still be helpful for how you can plan your final exams and how you can study for them. The thing about colleges is that they look at your progress throughout the year, so they're not only looking at your final score, but they want to see the progress. And also, to be honest, in order to get that final score of, for example, say 45 in IB, you do need the progress building up to get to that final score. So that's why I'm not going to only talk about how you can study within the last 2 weeks of cram, but how you can study all throughout the year. So let's get started into the video. Firstly, I want to talk about what I do within the first week that I get the new information. At our school, we normally get a set of presentations or PowerPoints that go through exactly the whole content that we would need. This is not really applicable, I would say, to other schools maybe that don't have teachers that make PowerPoints, but if in that case, they'll always give you textbooks and you can just base your notes off of that. So then throughout the class, she would talk about the presentation and then sort of emphasize the key points. And then from those key points, I would note down what she said. And then I would also note down everything that's on the PowerPoint. And then I would highlight the parts that she said are very important. And then after class or on the weekend, I would go through those notes again. I would add anything that I've maybe not finished. For example, if my notes aren't really exactly finished for a particular subject, then I would go back into that PowerPoint and I would redo my notes. I might even erase or delete the entire note just to redo it so that I can get the most important parts into my notes. And after I finalized my notes, so basically I've gotten everything that I think is useful from the PowerPoint or from the textbook, then I would close my notes and then I would take out a piece of paper and then I would just begin writing down, recalling everything. So I would, for example, hide my notes on maybe a definition and then I would only show the key words and then I would note down everything that the definition has said, and then that helps me recall. I think this way is very similar to Quizlet flashcards or to Anki cards, but I've never made Anki cards before, so I've always just hid my the definition part of my notes, and then I've just written down what I remember off of the definition, and then I would check and go back with a red pen and just to cross out everything that I think is wrong. And I would say I would do this exercise around weekly at the start, but then later on as the year progressed and there were maybe a lot of exams coming up, I would almost do this every single day. Anytime that I had the chance, I would just go back through my notes and I would do that revision. So I think that would be it for my weekly revision. Part 2, I want to talk about how I study for an upcoming exam. So this is what happens normally at the end of a month. We have a unit exam or something that has to do with a summary of everything that's happened within the unit. And to do this, I think probably my favorite thing to do is to create a mind map. Mind maps, I think in my case, are not maybe exactly what you guys think it is. So for me, in my case, I create a guide. I create a huge Word document where I just dump all of the key points. So I look at my notes and then I go onto a Word document and then I just put maybe a topic about for example, Unit 2, and I would write down all of the key points that have to do with that particular unit. And in that case, those are the most succinct or the most important parts of my notes. So sometimes I have cases where in my notes I have a huge table, but because it's hand drawn, then I have to revamp it when I put it onto the document. And to be honest, I think sometimes on the document it's clearer than it is in my notes, so I use both. And actually by putting it on the document, it helps me have a smoother flow of ideas and also of my points. And I think this is just a way to organize your notes. For example, maybe if your notes are too scattered, then you can have a document where you can put all the key points onto one section and then maybe some excess information on the other. And yes, and these are some examples of my documents. Then as I'm making those documents, I tend to be doing past papers. So I normally get these past papers either by searching whatever topic it is online. So for example, for biology, I literally just search IGCSE biology questions and then a whole bunch of past papers popped up, and I use those past papers and I just do a lot of them as practice just before the test. And then I would also do questions that are in my textbook. So not all teachers provide textbook. It depends on what curriculum you're following, but for some classes for mine for biology, we had a textbook, and I would just go to the back where there were questions and I would do those exercises. And then I think most importantly, I would again do memory recalls. So hide the meaning of the definition, and then I would just write down what I remember off of the top of my head when I see like that particular term. And I think just based kind of enough for what I need for my exams. Now for part 3, I want to talk about how I study right before the midterm or end term. I normally start this like process of revision around a month before the midterm or end term. For the end term especially, I would start at the very least a month mostly. But the thing is that at our school we have a lot of like unit exams literally just right before the end term, and so I can't necessarily only focus on the end term. I have to do both like the whatever like exam I have coming up as well as preparing for the end term. So this is why I would say like start early, maybe 2 months is too much because maybe 2 months you haven't even learned everything yet, but around a month is pretty much enough. You want to begin to get into the mindset of like gathering the materials you need and like doing like very intensive weekly recalls. And so step 1 in this end term process, revision process, is that you need to create a revision guide, or at least that's what I've done. I think that's really, really helped me because then I was able to group like the units that were really similar together and like separate the units that were very different. So I want to take the case of my chemistry exam, for example. This group like similar units together. So for example, unit 1, we had topic 1 and topic 4 that were similar, so I grouped those together. Unit 1 again, we had topic 2 and topic 3, I grouped those together. And then this was unit 1 again, and it had topic 5, 6, 7, 8 that were very similar together, so I grouped all of them together. And then from that, I would make a list of like things that I must get done. For example, notes meant I was doing memory recalls. This said handout. Handout is sort of like the textbook that we have, and so it meant whether I had the time to go through the entire handout, take out the key points, basically redo the entire thing. In our handout, we had not only like textbook information, but we also had exercises. So I would have to, I'll pretty much redo almost every single question. I just skipped over, especially like the ones that I got wrong. I would redo those. And then part called OneNote. The reason why I have OneNote on here is because sometimes our teacher would put a lot of like guides and information on OneNote, and then we would just go on OneNote and we would scroll through like the key points, like the key PowerPoint, and I would just jot those down again. I would look at every single one of them, whether it's from like the start of the year or whether our teacher has made like a new like revision guide, then I would base off of my notes based off of that. And then PPT, it's the same thing as PowerPoint, the same as OneNote. It depends on the teacher, but it's just that for chemistry, in this particular case, we had both. And then we have this thing called Assess Prep. This is not for every single subject, but for chemistry, we had like, it's sort of linked with ManagBack, and then you could do exercises on there. So I would say that Assess Prep, PDF, worksheet, and FA, these are all like exercises that I could redo and I could look back on, and I could like re-go through a lot of those exercises. To be honest, I would say that for some teachers, they actually put like literally like the exact same question from the exercises that we've done in the past onto the final exam paper, and it's just a matter of whether or not you've actually gone through those papers. And it's not always the case that they would always do that, but you can always be like on a lookout for when they do that. And then finally, SAIA, endterm, midterm. And what I mean with that is that SA is what we call summatives at our school. IA is called internal assessment, and I would just go through and go back and look at what I've done, what I've written for those, and then look at like my grade that I got, and then I would sort of redo them or like write a whole new draft for them, and then I would go back and match it and just check if my answers are still the same, and it's basically just more exercises for myself. There's only so many questions that you can be tested on, and I think that if you do more of them, you're just going to increase your chances of being able to score higher. So yeah, I think those are all my tips that I have for conquering pre-IB, or I would not say for IB yet because I've not gone through that stage. But I just want to put a little side note here that success is not about like your final destination. I think everyone can be successful at some point in their life. About managing your time so that you're able to get the grade that you want on the end term exam. So this means that I think for a lot of my subjects, to be honest, I could have gone better, or maybe I could have even dropped to even like a lower level had the final exam not come around that time. The past academic year, I think my Chinese was very, very close. It was on the brim of reaching like a 5 instead of a 6, but it was just that like the end term came, I think, right at the point where I think I was just about to fall off. So I would say that getting good grades is about how you manage your time and how you're able to structure and like put together your life right before the end term or midterm comes. It doesn't mean that you are going to be a 7 for sure in English for the rest of your life. It just means that at that point, at that time, in that year, you are at a level 7 or a level 6. And I think that that's something that a lot of people need to change their mindset to. It doesn't mean that you're going to be a failure for the rest of your life, but at the same time, it means that for that particular period of time, you did not do as well as maybe you could have, or you might have done better than you probably would have imagined. So I think don't too happy or too sad about your grades because it's always going to change. And always remember to keep working hard. I know that it's maybe easy to say keep working hard. I always get that comment like keep up with the good work, and I'm always like, what do you mean the good work? What exactly am I doing wrong? What exactly am I doing right? But just keep figuring that out. And I think that this is like a study plan that I have done that I think worked well, at least for this year. I'm not so sure how well it will work for me when I get into the IB, but I just think that it's something that you could like maybe off your study plan off of, find something that works for you, find something that you're able to retain, recall the information that you get, and find a way to like prepare you for the final exam.